Welcome to Human Powered, the podcast about creating a high-performing agency or consultancy business. I'm Trenton Moss, leadership coach, exited agency founder, and author of the book Human Powered. And on my podcast, my guests spill their secrets about how they've created high-performing teams and how this has translated into running a high-performing business. So today, I've got the huge pleasure of being here with Danny Bluestone, founder and CEO of CyberDuck. Danny, thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be here.
So I'm going to quickly introduce you, Danny. I want to kind of just explain a bit why you're here and what you've achieved. So you started your agency CyberDuck almost 20 years ago, So back in just by yourself in a flat in North London. And wow, what a journey you've been on. So you started your digital transformation agency all around blending design, user experience, and open source technology. And over the last almost 20 years, you've grown it to over 100 people. You've won a whole bunch of awards along the way. And then last year, congratulations, you sold the business to CACI. What a journey. And I really want to delve into that journey with you today to understand how you created such a high-performing business to get it to where you got it to. Outside of work, you also mentor Black founders as part of a startup accelerator that you're involved in. Entrepreneur of the Year with the Lloyds Bank. So incredible journey that you've been on that I want to dive right into. So obviously the podcast is all about high-performing businesses and high-performing teams. So let's start with that. I guess the first thing I want to ask you, Danny, is, how do you define high-performing within CyberDuck?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two parts to performance. There's obviously the financial part, the numbers, building profitable businesses that succeed and deliver what they need to do for be it for clients or internally with their products. And then there's the human side, which is very much about building performance around the passion of the team, the fact that you have a resilient team that is very stoic and entrepreneurial, so they have the autonomy and the agency to perform in the first place. And you can't have one without the other. What I mean by that is you need the numbers, you need the targets, you need to build a profitable business, and equally you need those human skills to really develop the type of capabilities and competencies to do really, really well. Yeah, so those are the two things that be it a brand or an agency will need to really succeed.
Yeah, makes total sense. Like as you're saying, the financial performance has to be there because then the business ceases to exist without it. But as a business, you're not going to feel like you're thriving without that human side. Now, there are two words that you said that I thought were quite interesting, and I want to pick up on. You talked about having a resilient team and an entrepreneurial team. So tell me a bit more about how do you build that resilience, and I guess also how do you build that entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, so when we in the early days, when we defined what the CyberDuck culture should be like, we went through several rounds of, okay, what are the values and behaviours that we really need to succeed and achieve our ambitions. And it's not, again, it's obviously the numbers, but obviously if you cascade sort of top down into the actual nitty-gritty, you need to define, okay, what are the products and services and the type of innovation? Because we were very small when we started, that entrepreneurial mindset was absolutely key for the people and the hires and the existing team. And I tried to drill that entrepreneurial thinking into everybody. Adaptability, as you know, Trenton, you ran your own successful agency as well for many years. The marketplace, the technologies have evolved hugely in the last 20 years from, when we started our businesses to where we are today. So besides that entrepreneurial spirit that was always true to everyone at CyberDuck. Other behaviours that I really looked for when I hired, promoted, appraised people were adaptive thinkers, so people who can adapt to different type of scenarios and situations, be it a technology change or a client changing their brief, or product changing. The other behaviors we looked for were accountability, so making sure that the team and the people were accountable. And finally, the other behavior we were looking for were sort of selfless people, so people who are willing to put the team and the cause before everything else, really, and really deliver from obviously the strategy all the way to the execution. So that was something that was injected into the culture. So I do recommend. I mean, each business is different, and will have slightly different values and behaviors. We've all heard of integrity. If you look at like big corporates like Enron, for example, it was all about integrity, but obviously it didn't really work out. So they have to be very, very specific, I would say, the values and behaviors to the personalities of the key people. It doesn't necessarily have to be the founder or CEO. What a lot of organizations do is look at the key players in the business, and it could include the juniors as well, and say, okay, look, what are the ingredients that these people have that really are driving the organization forward? And then it's a great way to then create almost like a cultural or value system that underpins the business moving forward. I mean, there's this famous saying, the culture eats strategy for breakfast, because strategies fail, whereas your culture is always there to guide you and support you. And I think you asked also about resilience. Resilience, it's not just good to be resilient by ourselves. So you might have one really resilient project manager, but the practitioners might be less resilient. You really want to have that resilient team mentality and build that up through training and coaching and mentoring, as well as obviously book reading and other academies as well.
Now, that's great. I mean, what I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, Danny, is just how clear you are on what you expect from people in order to have that high performing team. You talked about resilience there, and obviously you've got I think 4 behaviors that you've defined across the business, which is really good. Actually, you see some business defining values and behaviors they have 8 or 9 of them in long sentences. If you ask someone to say them, it's pretty unlikely they'll remember, whereas 4 short words is much easier to remember. So what I'm interested to know is, with these behaviors, for example, these 4 behaviors that you believe are critical for the team in order for your business to be high performing, tell me a bit about how you really embedded that in the culture. And what I'm interested to hear about is specifically how you did that when you're starting out, when you're quite small, versus how you do it when you become 100 people.
Yeah, so it's obviously you learn. If I knew what I know now, let's say 19 and a half years ago, I would have clearly been a lot smarter and more successful. So a lot of it comes through experience, and you learn, like sometimes when you're small and young, you know things, but you don't really know them and you can't really articulate them. And eventually those gut instincts turn into more academic, documented processes and beautiful behaviors and values that you can pin on the wall. I would say that in terms of what guided me at the beginning, it was, I guess, as somebody that starts a business from scratch, you have to have a very good instinct with people, and you need to, when it's just you by yourself and you're hiring 1 or 2 or 3 people, you need to look at other humans, and see if they share the same morals and values that you share. I would say that is the first thing that you need to look at, and then eventually, as hiring managers, we're all. I never believe that you can delegate hiring to, let's say, a recruiter or a human resource person, even though once you're a more established business, it becomes a lot easier to do. But when you're young and new in the world and you're building, a business or an agency, you have to really get the hiring right, and you have to do most of the things yourself, because otherwise somebody who doesn't know you and you don't have like all of this documented story behind the business, and they're just not going to know what to do for you. So you as the hiring manager have to get the hiring right. It's always the most important thing for any business is the people. It's winning business is far easier than hiring, because once you have fantastic people, you can win the business. And as you grow and scale, you need to bring more people in. So it never stops. And that's always like the hunt for talent is going to be something that everybody will constantly be doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like you're saying, that I really like the analogy you use there, that it's far easier to win business than it is to hire good people. Because if you hire good people, then everything good follows from there. Like, you're more likely to win the new business. It's really interesting what you talked about, how, you would be so hands-on in those early days in terms of, making sure that they were the right people. And then what happens when you get to business of 80, 90, 100 people? How do you scale that?
Well, I think the interview process or the hiring process is something that at least at Cyberduck constantly evolved. And I did initially bring in various consultants and spoke to other friends who ran businesses, like what do you ask people in interviews? How do you judge a character? How do you test their technical skills? And eventually there was one guy that I brought in who was really good, actually, a guy called Andy Selway. And he at the time recommended like a competency type of interview, which was basically testing, you know, both the or assessing rather than testing the human side, the cultural fit, and then the technical skills through, be it tasks or presentations or tests. I mean, it's quite funny because I meet people now who used to work for me before, and existing people that have worked for me for a long time, and they said, "Oh, I remember coming in and presenting in front of 10 or 15 people, which was the whole business." So in those days, before, it was very much like a panel exercise in those days, and it's not too dissimilar to like Google and how Google hires. It's very much focused on panel interviews, and in the book, how Google works, they talk about their very extensive interview process. I think there's like 7 or 8 rounds. It wasn't too dissimilar with us as well. Like, I had a lot of feedback that the Cyberduck interviews, some of the hardest to get through, because we put a lot of work into, okay, what do we want to get out of them? What is the process? Should we have an initial call just to test communication, and then send them a questionnaire to see, how they respond, and ask them for examples from their previous work as well, because sometimes you get really confident people that can talk the talk but can't walk the walk at all. So you have to test all aspects, or assess, all aspects, from like obviously the communication skills all the way to cultural fit, to then actually seeing real examples of their work. And it does vary based on, obviously, most of my hires have probably been more on the software engineering side of software development, because even though we've always been known as a service design UX agency, the technology team is larger and there's more people coming in because the projects generally take longer to deliver. So those guys would have a slightly different process. But yeah, we did eventually. After years and years and years, I came up with like a model on what are the 3 ingredients should the perfect hire have, and that's been really fascinating, because I really thought about really deeply about, some of the best hires, what did they all have in common? Because obviously, yes, I had 100 people working for me, but I probably interviewed 600 or 700 people over the years, that like countless interviews, interview after interview after interview, because you don't always hire every single person. For every candidate, you may have 5 or 6 people that you interview, and then sometimes people will drop off. And so I came up with like these 3 pillars of exceptional talents. And what I found is that the first one is what is their track record? How stellar have they been in their previous role? And that obviously will vary based on, if it's a graduate, they wouldn't have had a previous role, right? But if it's someone who's experienced, how long, what has their loyalty been like? Have they been contractors or permanent? And obviously if they've been contractors, fair enough. But if someone's a contractor and all of a sudden wants a full-time job, is there a story behind that? Or are they just finding the market difficult? So as part of the track record, I also look for their exceptional achievements at work, and also the cultural fit. Like what were the previous values and behaviours that they exhibited or benefited from being exposed to, and what did they like or dislike. So that's a really good one. Then the second pillar I look for is like their broad work evidence. So how do we actually, as Cyberduck, how do we actually validate their skills and test their skills against what we're doing? Because every single business works slightly differently. While a lot of the skills are transferable, you need to make sure that it's valid for your business. And so we look at the evidence of their previous work. This is assessed obviously through interviews and tasks, and where we can do a sort of try before you buy, where we bring someone in for a day and get them to just give them some work. That's a really good one. Like as an example, on the second pillar, I remember hiring for a head of IT, which I always found in a design agency was very difficult because, it's Max. And in those days, like Max was very much uncorporate. So, and eventually we found the lady in Hungary. We were in the EU in those days, so it was a lot easier to hire people from Europe. And on paper, she was brilliant. We even had a video call with her. Me and Sylvan, who, my co-founder, were like, wow, she's the one. And then I said to Sylvan, look, she's all the way in Hungary. We were ready to make her a job offer and relocate her to the UK. And I'm like, should we just try her out for a week? We'll pay her. We'll bring her in for a week. We'll put her in the office and see how she gets on with our IT. Because the only problem that we had is she was coming from a big technology consulting business. So that was the only thing that we were unsure about. So we brought her in, and actually what we found is that she just couldn't cope with any of the tasks that we gave her in the office. She wasn't suitable because she was used to working in a massive business where everybody was doing things with her and for her. And obviously that's where like the try before you buy is really, really fantastic. And then the third pillar is like the diverse personal experiences. So I've always believed that diversity is a superpower. So we're not sort of looking for everybody to be the same, but essentially what we're looking for are exceptional things that they've done in their personal life rather than work. So like their why, their story, what really keeps them and makes them passionate, what their ambitions are, and how they've been resilient in their personal lives. And we all have our moments, but really you're looking for those sort of bounce backs. So as an example, it could be that they're really ambitious with their sports, or they've done great things with the family. Like even having kids and going through that journey, as you know, of having kids, raising kids, it's definitely an exceptional experience for a lot of people. So it's those type of stories that we're looking for. And ideally, the more diverse, the better.
Wow. You have just downloaded the most unbelievable amount of insight. And like, it's great. Like you said, you've done, I think you said 600 interviews over the years, and you've been able to boil it down to just 3 pillars, which is incredibly insightful to hear. The other great insight that at least I'm hearing from this is just how much time and effort you put into recruitment. And, you're comparing yourself to Google in terms, with a massive company with massive resources, and you're putting a similar amount of man hours and effort into your recruitment process. But clearly this works.
It doesn't always work, and you have to be ready for failure as well. Like sometimes where you think you'll have a brilliant interview, what I would say is like my model worked for me 9 out of 10 times. That's what I would say. And I think eventually leaders and hiring managers, they'll build the gut instincts that also really complement this as well.
Wow, but a 90% success rate, I think most of us would want that.
Yeah, that success rate is on the people that we deemed as suitable, and in terms of that working out. Of course, I've sat in loads of interviews where the people just weren't suitable, and you can tell either in 2 minutes or 20 minutes that and then you just know that. But we have had scorecards as well that we've used, quite rigorous scorecards, that are collaborative scorecards, of course, and then ultimately someone will make a decision on whether to go or no go.
For you, what I'm hearing is, to get those high performing individuals, you need to invest in the recruitment process, define exactly what you need, define the behaviors that you're looking for, and go in real depth in that interview process and that recruitment process to make sure you get the right people in. And you're succeeding 9 out of 10 times in terms of those hires. So then how do you build on that? You've got, amazing people, real great high performers in the business. How do you bring them together so you've got high performing teams?
So just to sort of follow on from that, like so a key part is once you, even before you, it all starts with a job advert or a mission. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, he obviously was really invested in the talent market and had a lot of experience. And I read a really fantastic article, probably about 10 years ago now, from him, where he was saying, look, to really make your talent the top performers that you dream of, you have to have something called a tour of duty or a mission for each particular individual. So to define basically what their mission is, because they have to be super clear from the moment they get exposed to your brand, like what their mission is. So it does tie into the brand as well, of course, but because if your brand, they're going to look at your website, they're going to look at the job description, like it has to be really focused on what the mission is, and then give them a tour of duty and basically have a framework. So it starts obviously with the hiring. One thing I didn't mention before is we've used some really good ATS solutions, like applicant tracking systems, where you can actually mold the interview questions and the scoring into that whole process. So it automates a lot of that as well around the hiring, which is fantastic. So let's say a candidate applies, they then receive questions that they need to answer, they then get asked to submit a piece of work. It all gets automated around to all of the hiring people. So it kind of removes that friction, and then everything becomes visible as well. And then once they come into the business, we then have a progression framework that links to their progress. So for example, obviously from the job description all the way to the KPIs, and then the human skills and the hard skills or technical skills. So we had the progression framework in place as well. So and then in terms of to continue that performance, obviously besides the progression framework, we had still do quarterly business plans, which are really clear. So we have an annual one, and then we have quarterly business updates where we bring everybody in. We'll fly people from all over the world, because probably about 10% of the team overseas, and we'll then have departmental KPIs, obviously numbers that people need to hit, and then that then cascades downwards into the progression framework around the competencies or competency scores and capabilities across human and hard skills, as well as cultural, how they're hitting kind of the cultural pillars as well. Like, have they been entrepreneurial, for example, and that will be part of what we look at. We've also in the past had things like business plan posters, where we would turn the entire business plan into an infographic and then get the team to actually sign their name to say, yes, we buy into this vision. So one of my favorite ones was having like ducks flying in a spaceship towards like the client planets, with all sorts of words, obviously explaining, some various kind of technologies that we were going to conquer. But yeah, the other thing also is having right sort of training in place, CPD. So again, it's part of that progression framework. So let's say if you want to build up the human skills, and this is where your book Human Powered was purchased, and we put them on the Team Sturka training, which people still talk about. Funnily enough, I spoke about it today to some other colleagues to say, look, this is a really fantastic course that helps everybody. Because I remember when I went on the course, he said, look, Danny, if the CEO doesn't come on the course, it doesn't work, because everybody needs to buy in. And it really used a lot of, I think for me, one of the big memorable ones was listen before you speak, and really developing those listening skills, which sounds really easy, and it's something that mum and dad always used to say. But I think the benefit of going on a course like that is you role play and you really get to do it. And there's obviously other training as well over the years. Like we we sent, when we built our project management team up, we managed to get EU funding to send a bunch of people into project management MAs. So constantly investing in training time, innovation time, CPD. It really, really helps to build those high performing team members.
Okay, so there's so much to it, so many things to think about. You've got the right people in, then you've got to align them around the vision and the plan. I love your idea of getting people to sign their name on the infographic. It's a really nice thing to do. And then, like you say, in terms of recruitment, you got it right 90% of the time. What about the other 10%? How do you deal with people who are preventing the business from being high performing?
So there's a concept called radical candor. So there's a book and there's a fantastic article on a website called First Round, which is all about scaling technology businesses. Essentially, what radical candor is about how do managers and leaders not fall into the trap of too much empathy and or basically just not giving a shit. So it's like there's a middle ground, like between showing too much empathy and really caring, and even building friendships with the people in the team to a point where you actually can't manage them and give them radical feedback. And then on the other side, there's obviously managers that are way too stringent and treat people like crap blatantly. It's about finding that middle ground and the quadrant of really caring about people, but going up to them and giving them feedback. Like I there was one person that I managed who actually did it to me, and she said to me during a pitch, she said, "Danny, it was a great pitch. You really did well. But you kept saying, I just wanted to raise it with you." She said to me, "My dad's a management consultant and she's done it with me." And that's essentially radical candor. It's being able to go to someone, be it someone above you or below you or on the same level, and really give them feedback. Sometimes it's very painful to do that. And it could be about a personal, even something very personal, that someone has a particular habit that, let's say, isn't welcome in the workplace, and you just have to deal with it. And not everyone's going to be happy, and sometimes somebody might get upset or go, or quite often it will require the hiring manager possibly escalating it and going to somebody else, and even going into some sort of disciplinary action. So it's just about not leaving problems or stones unturned and dealing with things. There was one story that I have also where there was almost a team rebellion when we were much smaller at Cyberduck, where there were a lot of people who, I think we were hiring. One of the problems we had, we were hiring so quickly. We were hiring too fast, and we just brought in too many people too quickly, spread across loads of different technologies, which what we found later on is we shouldn't have supported so many different technologies. And then eventually our profitability started to suffer. This was probably about 16 years ago now. So it was a lesson that was well learned at the time. And then we had to deal with all of those individuals. But everything was happening behind sort of leadership's back, and we weren't finding out until it was very, very late in the day. And then a number of things happened. Some of the people just left by themselves, and then with others, we just had to take disciplinary action because they just weren't the right individuals. That was probably before I had like the proper business plans and a lot of the processes that I spoke about earlier. And we just had to learn from experience in terms of how to deal with those sorts of situations.
Wow, but a team rebellion. That's amazing that you had that and that you survived it. We can often shy away from these difficult conversations. And I think what you're saying is you've got to get on with it. If something's not working out, you've got to talk to that person and come from a place of kindness, obviously, but you have to sort it out and have that radical candor. So, Danny, obviously the business, as of last year, Cyberduck has become part of a much larger business, a large IT business, CACI. So I'm sure there are changes happening and changes will continue as you start to integrate. So you shared some lovely things about what you do to make sure that CyberDuck is a high-performing business. What do you need to do now that you're becoming part of this much larger IT business? How do you maintain that level of high performance?
So one of the reasons why we joined CACI was to really take our business to the next level. We were growing our revenues by about 35% year on year for the last 4 or 5 years, and starting to compete with some really big players. So it was either me bringing quite a lot of investment in through personally, through banks or private equity, or joining another business which was complementary to ours. With obviously CACI, a much larger business, but have a lot of capabilities that we don't have, and we had capabilities that they don't have. So it's very much a match made in heaven. Obviously, there's two slightly different cultures. I'm currently been, for the last 4 months, working on bringing my team into this business and basically turning it into a big success, which I'm really excited about. So obviously, our roles are slightly changing, at least for some of us, me included, and it actually gives me the opportunity to really get closer to the craft and to the digital side of what we do, what we deliver. So I'm actually becoming more involved in client projects for the first time in quite a long time, and bringing in a lot of the skills that I've developed as an entrepreneur. Building the business into client projects is extremely exciting, and it's a bit like turning from an entrepreneur to an intrapreneur, where you're more internally facing. So I'm still working externally, of course, on partnerships and with clients, but I'm no longer the CEO of a business. So somebody else is obviously making a lot of decisions, but we have that autonomy within CACI, within the units that we now belong to. It's a very, what I would call, entrepreneurial business unit, and we're part of the decision-making process. So I can't wake up one morning and completely change direction like I could at CyberDuck, and not to say that I would do it, but within these kind of constraints, there's a lot of creativity and a lot of scope for growth and opportunity, which is really, really exciting. I can already see how the business is scaling, and where CACI are adding so much value to what we have brought to the table in terms of they have some fantastic data teams, and the unit that we've joined have got a really mature delivery and technology business unit that is really, we're learning a lot from them. So it's very much complementary, and it's all part of my journey as being an entrepreneur, is learning, similar to what you did, what comes with that M&A process and that integration with another business. I don't think you can ever be complete if you haven't gone through that particular process. And sometimes it can come in you acquiring other businesses. Sometimes it comes from the other way, where you get acquired. So, I mean, at CyberDuck, we did acquire 1 or 2 products as well. We had to go through a mini M&A process, but it's not the same as going through a fully blown share purchase agreement and the whole cycle of selling a business. So it's been fantastic.
Wow. And it sounds like you're a great fit together. Like you say, 2 complementary businesses. Well, Danny, thank you so much for joining me today. I've learned a lot from listening to you, especially that focus you have on recruitment, on bringing in the right people, on then how you create them to be that high performing team. And it's been great to hear, and it's been lovely to hear about the next step of your journey now that you're part of this much bigger IT firm. So, Danny, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful to talk to you.
Amazing. Thanks.
You've been listening to Human Powered, the podcast all about creating a high-performing agency or consultancy business. Thanks for tuning in.